We're not seeing any, Judge. So moved.
Okay. Because my mic wasn't on. All right. We've had a motion. We've had a motion and second for approval of the minutes from the December quarterly business meeting. All in favor of approval, say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? All right, we will approve the quarterly business meeting minutes. Because of a technical oversight on my part, not turning on my microphone, I will re-ask if there's anyone from the public who would like to comment here at this time. If you would activate your raise your hand feature on the on Zoom, and we will hear public comment. All right, there is no one responding for public comment. So with that, we will turn it over to our Executive Director, Dr. Kleiman, for an executive update.
Great. Thank you, Judge. To begin, I'd just like to let everyone know which commission members are here in person and which members are online. We're joined by Judge Marsico, Attorney Balkovic, Professor Rago, and Judge Daly here in person, as well as our ex officio members, Secretary Harry and Chairman Fox. And joining us online are Judge McDermott, Judge McLaughlin, Representative Bonner, and Senator Street. I think that is the comprehensive list. Great. And I'd like now to turn it over to our ex officio members for any report. I'll start with Secretary Harry.
Thank you. Just two quick things. We continue to work on inter-rater reliability with regard to our Strong R assessment tool, and also continue to work closely with the commission regarding the veteran study. I know you've toured some of our veteran services units, and I think we might have an update here later. So just looking forward to continuing that work.
Great. And I want to thank your staff, especially Mike Carrington, for facilitating our visits, but also explaining to us a lot about individuals who are incarcerated, who are veterans, and the programs that are offered in the various SCIs. So thank you.
Welcome.
I'll turn it over now to Chairman Fox.
We just continue to have a great working relationship with the commission. We want to thank some of the Dr. Kleiman and for coming, and they've actually observed some interviews that we have done, and to kind of get a better sense of kind of what we do. The guideline implementation is continuing to work forward. We still have things that we're trying to hash out, but we'll continue to do that. I participated in the Villanova sentencing workshop, which the commission is very much involved in. And that's also been a very rewarding experience for those who have had the chance to do that. It's really been a great experience as well. So next month, we are going to have a retreat with the board, and we're going to go review all the data around what we're finding so far with our guideline form. So we really appreciate the analysis and the discussion so that the board has a better sense of kind of how these decisions are being made so that we can improve them in the futures. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Provide now an introduction to a new staff member. Our administrative and financial unit manager resigned prior to the last December commission meeting, and we posted for the position, and we're really glad to welcome Laura Jackson, who's with us today as the manager of the administrative and financial support unit. Laura joins us after working for 15 years at Penn State University at the Smeal College of Business in their accounting and risk management departments. And at the commission, she oversees the commission's financial operations, budget, administrative function, and importantly serves as a liaison with us to Penn State and HR as our function. So welcome, Laura. We're really glad and she's done an amazing job as well as the rest of her unit in making sure our financial obligations have been met, bills paid, records entered, and all that good stuff. So a big thank to her and her unit for that. So I'm moving down the agenda now to commission operations. And I just want to lead by talking about the new meeting structure. And my apologies for any confusion for those who thought we were still convening at 9 o'clock. After talking with the chair and the vice chair for a number of reasons, some related to efficiencies, that given the tremendous focus right now really on implementing the guidelines and conducting a lot of research, we're not developing new policies at the moment per se, that it would be best to combine the policy and business meetings. So this has reduced, of course, the costs for the dinner and some of the lodging for members. So again, allowing folks who want to drive here in the morning and then return in the evening. So I think that the chair and the vice chair reserve the right to call policy meetings in the future and to have, as you know, historically, there were times where there were 6 policy meetings in a year, not just 4. Some of them were all day or even 2 days or a day and a half. So I just want to make certain that we reserve the right to, or at least acknowledge that right to convene the policy meetings as needed when we start wrestling with new policies again and really need to lean into decisions at the granular level for these policy type decisions.
I think that sums it up well, the discussions we had. There's no sense having meetings just for the sake of having meetings. I'm not a big believer in that. And as Matt said, there have been plenty of times where we've had to have lots of policy meetings, public hearings, things like that, that we can always schedule. So if need be, we will certainly schedule policy meetings, and if need be, public hearings, on various issues that arise. But for now, it made sense for everybody's time and money, frankly, to consolidate into just this meeting.
Great, thank you. An additional activity, I've been working with our council on developing a small MOU that is utilized when we collaborate or have a affiliate with a university. And the idea and the importance of this is to recognize in writing that these individuals have a specific responsibility when using our data, that it's intended for one purpose, not to be misused. Also that to ensure that they don't misrepresent themselves as a member of the commission and their views are not the views of the commission in any actions that they do. And also an important part is to recognize some of these folks are, for example, at Penn State University, which is really next door to us. Our employees may have been former students of theirs, that these are not their students. They are employees of the commission and they need to treat them with dignity and respect, and also recognize that they can't make assignments to these individuals without coming through the commission first. So I'd like to just thank the council for that. Noah will be talking shortly about a new hire at Penn State. Really excited to welcome back. She's now being hired as a professor. She was a postdoc in our office for 3 years. Very familiar with our work, very familiar with our data. She's been at Towson University for the last, 3 or 4 years and is coming to be a professor, and we'll be working closely with the commission on research and a number of our initiatives. So really excited. And as you know, through this partnership with Penn State, we're able to leverage, and we'll hear later about the tremendous amount of work that Brett's unit does and all the units, but we really leverage these resources of grad students and postdocs, and in this case, a professor who was formerly with our office. So we're quite excited, but this was the first application to enact this MOU, and there's another partnership that we're collaboration rather, not a partnership with a professor, just due diligence on our behalf to make sure that that clearly is established what the expectations are. Okay, the next item for me is to discuss some fiscal matters. On pages 16 through 39 of the materials is our fiscal audit. This is the fiscal year 2023-2024 audit. The commission has contracted with an independent accounting firm named Boyer and Ritter. We had a 3-year contract with them, and this is the second audit of the 3-year contract. And the audit is of the commission's financial and related compliance procedures. And in summary, they did not find any deficiencies in our internal controls and no instances of compliance, of non-compliance. Lots of instances of compliance. Whoops. All right. So I'm to the chair would seek a motion for the approval of the financial audit.
All right, is there a motion for approval of Boyer and Ritter's audit?
Excuse me, Chair. It's written as an acceptance of the audit.
Acceptance,
So
okay.
that's the language for the motion, is an acceptance of the financial audit.
All right, is there a motion to accept the financial audit?
So moved, Judge.
Professor Rago. Second, Judge Dowley. Any objections? I'll ask it in this form. Is there any objection to accepting the audit? Hearing none, the audit will be accepted.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Now moving on to our operating budget on pages 40 and 41. At our December meeting, we amended our operating budget where we reduced the FTE of our staff from 24 to 22, eliminating 2 positions. So that is reflected in the operating budget of $3.7 million for fiscal year 24-25. I do want to note that we still have 1 outstanding vacancy on our organizational chart in the education and outreach unit, a 4th specialist that we're reserving as a vacancy right now for budgetary concerns. And I just want to highlight, similar to the changes in the meeting structure, that commission staff have been very thoughtful and focused on cost-saving measures right now, given our fiscal concerns. So we've limited travel. We restricted replacement of computers unless absolutely necessary, and a number of other activities to really think through, including preserving this vacancy until we find out where we stand with our budget coming through. I think that some of that action was in response to the governor's budget, where the commission, I think in February, learned that at least in the governor's budget, we were flat funded again for $2.553 million. One thing just to note in the operating budget, which we've talked about many, many times, is the cost of staff salaries is $2.7 million. So not any other operations, travel, all those other considerations right now. That appropriation doesn't even cover our salaries. Nonetheless, everything else that goes into our operations. So I'll have you, if you could, turn to page 42. And this is a review of basically what's in the banks currently. And we traditionally present the information at the top, and I've added a shaded section at the bottom because I just want to talk through, because I think at face value, it looks like maybe we have a lot of money in reserves. But so if we start with that 1.6 million in reserves, some of that, 687,000 roughly, is from our JRI2 money. And as you know, we previously had a contract with a consulting firm to help rebuild SGS Web, what we call CASER. That was for about $1 million. We canceled that contract. These are the remaining funds, but we're working with independent consultants now to offset and add the expertise needed for that project. So for me, I don't know the right phrasing. It's earmarked or reserved specifically for future work on that project. If we were to spend that money, the development of that new software to support the 8th edition guidelines, I have no idea what the timeline would be, but it could be years and years into the future. So at least in the short run right now, we're preserving those funds for the operations of our information technology and applications unit in the development of CASER. Moving down, we also have $97,000 right now in the MOU partnership. As you know, each year we make a commitment of $225,000 to Penn State University. In exchange, we receive HR services, financial services, computer services, software that we receive through the university. But that extra money is also for our space in State College. And we use that to hire the graduate students and postdocs that I mentioned to you earlier. Last year, traditionally, we have 2 grad students and 1 postdoc. We had fewer the last few years because of COVID and recruitments to the department. Our graduate student, who we've had for 4 or 5 years, departed in December to take a job, which is fantastic. Good for him. But again, that's what accounts for that reserve. And since the MOU with Penn State is for 5 years, my thinking is, and historically what the commission has done is, we don't utilize that money until that MOU period is over, and then it becomes the commission's to use. But right now it's earmarked for use through the partnership. And I believe we're in year 2, I think, or 3 of the current partnership with with PSU, not Michigan State University, which is on my mind for other reasons. Sorry about that. And then, as we know, we have these reserve funds, and these reserve funds were set aside in the mid-2010s with the purpose of, if there was a impasse in the budget and we didn't receive a budget, that the commission would be able to pay their bills into the future. So this equates to roughly 2.5 to 3 months of operational expenses and salaries. And it's been the view of the commission to, again, reserve this for that purpose. I think moving forward into the next fiscal year, if needed, the commission could advise us to utilize those funds for operating expenses if needed. But if we reserve all those funds that are earmarked, instead of being 1.6 million, it's really $72,000 left for us. Salaries are encumbered, but this is other operational expenses for the rest of the fiscal year. So I think we'll be okay through this fiscal year. And we'll talk in a moment about our budget requests and what happens in the future. So I just want to, before I get into the budget request that was put in, just talk a little bit briefly about the work of the commission in general. I think it will be reflected in the reporting out from the different unit managers and Ryan shortly, and our deputy directors. But work comes to us in many different ways. Of course, it comes through statutes. We have an enabling legislation that requires us to do a number of things, including being a clearinghouse of data, evaluations of effectiveness of programs, and so forth. But we also receive work, if you would, through specific legislation that names the commission and says, as part of this new, whatever it might be, the commission will do an evaluation in 2 years to see the effectiveness of this new policy or program. Of course, we also receive House and Senate resolutions. We've had HR 111 in the last few years, and now Senate Resolution 196, which is a 15-month project, and of course comes with it staff time, but travel and other things that are associated with that. Noah will point out later. We're going to be making for that resolution 3 site visits. We went to Allegheny, went to Jefferson County. We go into Chester. Again, that's staff time, travel, all those things. They don't come without cost, but we receive those without any sort of remuneration to offset our costs. We also receive requests from legislative members. We review proposed legislation, provide comment on them, and often provide impact analyses for proposals coming before the House or the Senate. We get a lot of specific requests from members of the criminal justice system, be it a specific DA asking how many of these happened in a specific year, what's the average sentence for this type of case. And then we, of course, have other responsibilities. We serve on statewide committees or boards through JNet, PCCD, and others. And this is all work that we think is incredibly valuable, and we appreciate being included, of course, and playing an important role. And I think that the commission has expanded its space since its initiation to working with the parole board, working more with DOC, working in the pretrial space. So while we're called the Pennsylvania Commission on Sentencing, clearly we are all throughout the criminal justice system working in that space. So under that umbrella right now, we're continuing to work on developing supporting materials and providing training for the 8th edition. As I noted, we're developing this new web-based application called Caser to replace our legacy application, SGS Web. But in the interim, we also have to support that legacy application to make sure it's working and functioning the way it is, responding to questions from stakeholders. As I noted, we work closely with the parole board. And as the chairman noted, we're actively right now developing quarterly reports, individual reports for parole members based on their parole decisional instrument, the guidelines. We now have a year worth of data that we're looking into. That takes time and energy, of course, for our staff, and we really appreciate it. And as the chairman mentioned, value that partnership and relationship. It's really exciting work, but again, it's part of our workload. We have upcoming work that Brett Miller will talk about to validate the sentencing risk assessment. That's included in statute, that we would do that as part of the development of that. As I noted, Senate Resolution 196 is a lot of work for staff. But a big part of our work that's kind of behind the scenes is the collection and dissemination of data. That's something that Ryan will note, and he'll talk about the judge verification process shortly that goes into the development of our annual reports, serves as the backbone of all of our research and evaluation. Not all, because we partner with DOC to receive information from them and the parole board and other justice partners. But we've developed dashboards that need updating. We've developed these data snapshots that take time to create. And I think it's even more complex with the new guidelines to how to accommodate both the 7th and 8th edition as we're receiving sentences from under both editions and transitioning towards the 8th edition. And then I'll just end on this, and then I'll talk about our budget request in a minute. We also, as I noted, assist with the development of new policies and legislation. And I'll just highlight one right now is that Ryan and I will be traveling to Allegheny next month to meet with Justice Todd, the District Attorney DA Zappala, Commissioner Rago, and other criminal justice stakeholders to talk about the role that the commission might play in thinking about elder justice issues. So that's something that we'll be meeting with, and we're happy to be at the table and partner with our partners on this important thing, especially working with the court. As I noted, we work with corrections, we work with the parole board and other agencies. But again, there's time and energy and need resources to support that. So sorry for that lengthy intro to this component, but to support these efforts on page 44 and 45, in February, I did submit a budget request to the governor's office, leadership in the Senate and the House. And the budget request was for $4.1 million to support general operations. And at the time, we thought that we would be exhausting the reserves. I think at the September commission meeting sort of showed that we would use all 700,000, but we really tightened the belt. And with the vacancies, there were other savings. I should note, by the way, from my budget report earlier, and I apologize, prior to this report, we had still surpluses from previous fiscal years. And we've exhausted those surpluses from the previous years. And those would have come from, for example, when former executive director Bergstrom retired, I became the executive director in January. We had a vacancy for the deputy director position. We hired Noah in July, sorry. So we had cost savings from that vacancy for that period of time. We've utilized all those. We're looking under mattresses right now to make sure we're still fiscally fine. So important to highlight that we've been flat funded since fiscal year 2019 and 20. And as I've noted, we've gotten a ton of additional responsibilities and continue to be asked to do more and more in various formats and platforms. And again, with the right funding, we certainly welcome that opportunity. With inadequate funding, I'm concerned that our ability to provide high quality service will erode and decline, and we'll have to make some choices about what to prioritize. And we'll lean certainly on the commission members to guide us and direct us of how we should best deploy our resources and what we're unfortunately unable to respond. We take great pride, of course, in responding to these really timely requests, timely. So when we get a media request, when we get a impact analysis request from the legislature, it could be within 24 hours. Questions from judges, Ryan's calling them back in hours, minutes. Questions from DAs around the Commonwealth, questions from our stakeholders about SGS Web and how to enter data. Our team is amazing, but again, that may be jeopardized without the appropriate funding. So, I'd like to just first thank the chair and the vice chair and our council for providing input and support over the last few months about how to think about these budgetary issues. I certainly plan to work closely in the coming months with them and to contact other commission members individually, as well as leadership in the Senate and House, to ensure that our message and our need is heard, and that we may find a way to secure the funding that's needed to help us operate in an efficient, effective, and vibrant way. And I think, an important part of this is certainly leaning on our members to help in this and assist us, especially our legislative members, to get that message forward. We spent a lot of time and energy last year. The chair and I met with countless folks, and we ended up with flat funding again, despite a lot of individual promises and assurances that wasn't going to be the situation. So I certainly I'll turn it to the chair for a moment, maybe to open up discussions of strategies or thinking about a path forward for us. But I see that Professor Rago has.
No, it's unfortunate. When the Chief Justice and DA Zappala asked about the commission, and they're very focused on elder justice issues in the court. They've been at it for more than a decade now. My first reaction was reluctance, not because of the capacity to do the work or the ability to do the work, but the capacity. And I explained to them that, they're being pressed and pressed. And when we get a resolution, veterans resolution, for example, which is important work that needs to be done, you can only get so much out of what we have. And to have $72,000 or whatever that number sorts out being, that's very, very close to the line. I think if we as commission members, if it's appropriate, to try to be creative in coming up with different means to approach the legislature, the governor's office, whomever, this is important work. And just on data requests alone, I mean, everything has to be data driven these days. We can't do that if we get smaller and smaller and more requests on top of that. I had to tell you, I almost told the court, no, I don't think we could do that because I'm sensitive to these stresses that you're facing. But this is such an important area in dealing with elders. I mean, in our county, Allegheny County, we have 1.3 million. 26% of us are over the age of 60. So it's not as if that's a small population that they're trying to respond to. So that's why I ended up coming to you guys to ask for that. And I appreciate it very much. But I'm hoping that we can get creative because everybody's facing these stresses. As I understand the budget and what's happening in Washington and the collateral effect on us and impact on Medicaid and other sources that need to be taken care of, I can see where the commission, as important as this work is way out of the lane for consideration. And maybe we can be more active in trying to help. So I thank you for coming to Allegheny County to help us with that. And again, it's a statewide unfunded request, and I appreciate that.
Well, I think that's a good idea for us at least to get with the Chief Justice, DA Zappala, to talk about that. I'm glad Professor Rago put that on their radar, that we're having problems here. Of course, the courts have had issues getting funding too the last few years. I've talked with Matt extensively about this. Obviously, we will defer to our legislative members since we are a legislative commission and they are the appropriations agency, I guess, for lack of a better term. The funding is going to come from the General Assembly with the governor's approval. It's my understanding most commissions were flat funded in the governor's budget this year. You know, I don't know if they're just trying to appease us, telling us that or not. But you know, that at least is, I guess, a piece of good news. Judge Daly is chair of the Pennsylvania Conference of State Trial Judges Legislative Committee. Obviously, he's an ex-legislator. Also has a lot of experience here at the Capitol. So, you know, hopefully with him, our legislative members, we can come up with a coordinated approach here in the next couple months, because it's sooner rather than later as we get to this. One of the things we talked about also doing was getting other agencies that benefit. They have their own issues, but our two ex officio members are here. And they've been great supporters of the agency, you know, writing on our behalf and things like that. But maybe reaching out to different agencies such as the District Attorneys Association, the Association of Criminal Defense Lawyers. That's, you know, really our constituents, for lack of a better term, that use the guidelines day in and day out, need the data, things like that, maybe to assist us in a full court press lobbying effort here, at the General Assembly. But I'll open it up for any discussion if anybody has anything they'd like to add, any suggestions, any ideas in that regard. All right. Well, keep us posted. If you have anything, let Matt, Representative Krajewski, or I know, as we go forward here, we'll try and get some meetings scheduled. We've already talked about that coming up in April, and getting some time here on Capitol Hill. So.
Great. Thank you, Judge. I'm now going to turn it over to Ryan Myers, our Deputy Director, and then followed by our other Deputy Director, Noah Painter-Davis.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Chair. So just let me give you a little bit of a heads up on how we're going to handle all the rest of the updates from staff. As Matt mentioned, I'll speak here for a few moments. Noah will come down and speak, and then we will actually ask the managers to come sit down here and speak to you during their updates. So we'll have a little bit of musical chairs, if you will, as we're going forward. So first, the two things that I want to talk about right now in terms of the administration and outreach update, and Matt had alluded to this earlier, is our annual reporting and verification process. And I thought it would be helpful from just a high level to overview that process for members. I know we have some newer members, and maybe we haven't spoke about that, but I think it's a helpful map to sort of walk through in terms of a project timeline, and also as members, what staff will be providing you in upcoming meetings. So that's the first bullet you see there, which I'll actually reserve to talk about in a moment, because I'll share a slide with you that visually is easier to follow than maybe my rambling for a few minutes. But the second bullet here is just to remind commission members that we have several MOUs with various universities throughout the Commonwealth. Obviously, Matt mentioned, our MOU with Penn State University and a lot of the sort of administrative support and efforts we have there. But we, as part of that MOU, we also agree to teach and instruct a undergrad course each semester, fall and spring semester. So just as a reminder, staff are currently doing that at the university, at Penn State University, and Penn State just came back from its spring break, and so sort of halfway through the semester, or getting towards the back end of that semester. But I think that's a good connection with the university. I know that our former executive director had instructed that course for a really long time. And just so everybody knows, full transparency, I took that course when I was an undergrad at Penn State from our former executive director. And so, maybe there's a pipeline to work for the commission at some point. So keep that in mind. But I say that, sort of jokingly, but also that, I think it's helpful, and we provide a lot of technical experience and expertise to students that are coming out and will be working in, the courts, probation and parole departments, and going to law school and so forth. So I think it is a good investment in our time, certainly from a staff perspective. The second there, and I think Chairman Fox had mentioned the Villanova sentencing workshop. And so we are just about ready to start session 2 and the final session of the workshop this year. And I think we're somewhere around the 22nd or 24th year of that workshop. And so that's been, a commitment through Villanova, through the commission, through the Administrative Office of Pennsylvania Courts to carry out this workshop every year. And I think it's really important. My time working for the commission and working at the workshop, the participants, we have common pleas judges. We have folks from the parole board, from the DOC, defense bar, prosecution. Our professional practitioners come away with, really liking that and finding it to be really helpful. And I know we have some members currently on the commission that are participating, and I believe we have some members of the commission who had participated in past years. And so, that's a positive commitment for us. And certainly the law school students get a lot out of our members and the other practitioners that participate. So we'll be wrapping that up next week, Thursday through Saturday, and then we'll be on to thinking about, hopefully, 2026 sentencing workshop. So with that being said, let me move to the reporting and verification and certification of compliance discussion, which I'm sure some of you have heard me mention this before, but I'll walk you through the slide here. And I should also note that there's a summary document in the commission's notebook on page 45. We tried to summarize this and put it into the materials to sort of memorialize this process. This takes an entire agency effort. Brett's unit and the data and research are a big player in collecting the information and analyzing it. Christie's unit and application information technology manage our SGS web and the information that we pull from there. Bobby's unit and education and outreach are sort of the direct connect to the counties and support technical assistance for this project. So I'll just give you a high level overview here. And it usually kicks off in January and February of each year, where staff of the commission reach out to AOPC to request their sentencing or their data from the prior year. So in 2025, we're thinking about 2024 sentences, right? And we want to make sure that we have all of the information from the courts that we possibly can have. And so it's this initial January and February effort in receiving AOPC's information, and then also taking the information out of the commission's online sentencing application, SGS web. And it's comparing those two data sets to make sure that we have everything that we're supposed to have for sentences of misdemeanors and felonies in the Court of Common Pleas. And through that analysis, we identify cases in which were reported to AOPC through the Common Pleas case management system in which we don't have a sentence in SGS web. And then we provide that information to every county. We provide it to the president judge, the criminal court judges, the district court administrator, the chief probation officer, to say, hey, here's this listing. We see this conviction and sentence in AOPC, but we aren't seeing it in our system. Can you take a look at that and submit any outstanding cases? And that's where having the education outreach unit closely involved, they're working with the individuals in the counties that have to submit that information. And so that takes place in April. Those sort of back and forths with the county is the month of April that we go through. We ask counties typically to have that submitted to us before the end of April. And then it gets back into, Brett's unit and the data and research to do the final analysis. And one of the outcomes that we look for now is what's the reporting percentage for counties in terms of sentences. And we try to make sure that they're at least 85% or higher. And over the last few years, we've really increased that percentage and have a really quite a high statewide average across for sentences reported. And I don't want to say the number because I don't remember, but I feel like it was in the mid 90s last year or high 90s, which I think is pretty impressive in terms of having all of the sentences reported to the commission. And as Matt mentioned, it's that data then, that data set that really leads to a lot of the work for the commission. Certainly that the staff will then come back in June and present to commission members county reporting percentages and statewide reporting percentages. We'll communicate that information to the counties. We make that information available on the website. So it's, public information in terms of how well a county is doing in reporting to the commission. And then that data ends up being part of the annual report, the responsibility, of the commission to create an annual report each year on aggregate sentencing and sentencing practices. And so, what we hope is we'll continue to follow this timeline, and come June, we'll have that information to report out to you. And then what I'll say on this slide, and then sort of move off from it, is that once we get to that June point and we have the full data set, and that's when staff can create the information necessary for the annual report. And so I just wanted to kind of walk through our plan right now in terms of where are we with annual reports and what's upcoming. And so a couple of months ago, I guess now, or maybe a month or so ago, we posted the 2022 annual report. And so that checkbox has been completed. Staff are currently finalizing the 2023 annual report, which we intend to bring to the commission and have ready for posting on the commission's website by June. All right, so we'll be working this spring to finalize that. And then after June of this year, staff will switch their attention to the 2024 annual report. And our goal is then by the time we get around to our September commission meeting or there around that timeline, we'll be able to post the 2024 annual report. So we'll have all of that information available. We've mentioned this in past commission meetings, we've been a little delayed on those reports, and in large part, during the development of the 8th edition sentencing guidelines, there was a lot of air sucked out of the room and getting all of that information out there. So we're happy that we have the 2022 full report available, and we'll be releasing the 2023 soon. But I just wanted to at least note that while the physical report was recently posted, the commission's data tables for that year have been available on the commission's website. And so to kind of keep consistent with that practice, once we finalize the 2023 data sets, we will be making those available on the website, followed by then the full written report. And we intend to kind of keep that same theme going forward for 2024. That way, at least the information's public, and then the documentation of commission activities sort of flows behind that. So I know that that's a lot on timelines and annual reporting and verification, but I just want to take a moment to update everyone on where we are there. I'll pause for a moment if there's any questions. Seeing and hearing none, Chair, if you don't mind, I'll ask Bobby to come down and provide the update for education and outreach.
Bill, good morning. I have a couple of different updates for you. I wanted to take a moment. I know I often talk a lot about the programming that we have, and I just wanted to highlight two different things that we're working on that I think is noteworthy. As you're probably familiar, we do lots of seminars throughout the year, and that's a really important aspect of the work that we perform. But what we've tried to do over the last, well, I'll say 2 years that I've been here, is try to diversify the different ways that we can provide content to people. And so today, one of the things I just wanted to highlight for a little bit is our e-learning. So e-learning is a different approach to how we provide content to people. I think it's something that might be familiar to many of you if you've had the opportunity, either requirement by HR typically or other types of opportunities to learn information. And so it's really that on demand. You could, if you're up at 3 a.m. like I am, you can go onto our website and check out our different e-learning modules that we have. And so first I'd like to give a thanks to Krista Rubin. She's been coordinating our efforts in e-learning. We're up to 4 different separate modules of different content. So right now, if you're to check us out, we have SGS Web Updates is the first e-learning module that we worked on. We also have modules related to determining prior record score. We have one on sentencing levels. And then we just released a SGS Web Update module, just kind of identifying some changes that we made in SGS Web. And so that was a really nice opportunity for us to narrowly focus in on those changes. And I think the use of e-learning was really helpful in that regard. And so what's what's really nice, I think, about e-learning in general is it incorporates a lot of different elements for learners. Certainly, we have knowledge checks and quizzes, and I think in terms of consumption of the information, it's that smaller scale, and I think it makes it a lot more relatable. Uh, as Matt mentioned earlier, one of the other, I think, important benefits of e-learning is it's very cost effective and scalable. So we're able to reach a large number of individuals, and the associated cost of traveling or dedicating staff hours to that. Once we have it up and running, it's self sustaining for us. So I think that's really helpful. And another aspect of e-learning that I really like is we're really able to leverage other resources that we have available. We have a number of reference guides, other documents that we can reuse and deploy into the e-learning modules. So we're getting those documents into the hands of practitioners as well. So we have a lot of great resources available, and we're able to deploy those in multiple ways and make sure people have different opportunities to consume that information to them. I think, as you can appreciate with e-learning, adult learners have a different background, knowledge, experience, and they're able to really deploy that knowledge a little more directly and apply it in a way I think that's beneficial to them. So really excited to continue to expand on our e-learning. We have a couple other modules that we're looking to release throughout this year. So keep an eye out for those as you continue to check our content in the education and outreach portion. I do have a couple screenshots just to give you, if you haven't had an opportunity, what our e-learning modules are formatted on the screen there for you. So this is just an example of one of the quizzes in one of our modules, where it give her couple different ways to try to make it engaging. Are there any questions on e-learning? Yeah.
Can you track how many people are using them?
Yeah, we do have the ability to track those. It's expanding. We're seeing our most recent one that we released surrounding the SGS web updates. I think we had around 30 or 40 people already consume that in a couple weeks, which is, I think, pretty good. And so we're continuing trying to make this known to people because it's something newer, I think, for us. We've only done it for a short period of time, and people aren't quite as familiar with that. So looking to continue to promote that as well. Any other questions? All right. The other big update that I wanted to just spend a couple minutes on to highlight is related to what we're calling the PCS compendium. And what is this compendium? So as you can appreciate, previous editions of guidelines, we always had an implementation manual, which was the kind of the playbook, the Bible, however you want to refer to it as, with a lot of content. But one of the things I think that was done well in the 8th edition of guidelines is it's a lot more comprehensive and clear and complete, in that regard, that as we were looking through what we're providing to individuals, we thought we had a nice opportunity to maybe do things a little bit differently. And so what we're doing is kind of like an encyclopedia approach to the resources that we're providing to people. Maria Agello, our policy specialist, has been coordinating this charge. And what we have on the screen, this is just kind of a what it could look like. But what we're looking to do are have different volumes. And so those are like the larger topical areas. But then within each of those, so I'll go to the next slide, we have like a handbook or a shorter, more condensed, more direct topical areas. And I think what's going to be really nice about that as we're continuing to develop this is, again, we can use a lot of cross-reference to other materials that we have, reference guides, statutory citations with hyperlinks, trying to modernize the approach to what we have. And so, my view is we'll have the ability to have this electronic reference that people would bookmark. And if they need something about mandatory sentencing provisions, they can go to that handbook, find the statutory citations, What other documents do we have internally that might be helpful to try to clarify the issue for individuals? So I'm really, really excited about this project. I think anytime you have an opportunity to look at things a little bit differently, I think it can be beneficial. And I think this is one of those projects that is definitely within that realm for us. So that's kind of our approach in looking for this. We spent some time, with the first year of the guidelines being out in the wild, seeing what experiences are for individuals and see what do we want to incorporate into this type of document. And so we're going to be building this out here over the next several months. If there are any questions on Compendium? All right. So now just going through the general housekeeping information that I've typically provide. We'll start with our technical assistance. So as you can appreciate, our first couple months, January, February, we had a good number of inquiries coming in, 227 requests from practitioners and 27 role requests for new users of SGS Web. So kind of following our trajectory from the end of last year, seeing an uptick with some questions. I think that we can appreciate that as more 8th edition cases are flowing through our court systems. We're seeing those questions coming through as well. We also had 11 requests from incarcerated individuals and 2 right-to-know requests. So we're handling those as per our practice. We did have the opportunity to have our Education and Outreach Committee. We met in February. We do have the minutes from that meeting posted in the supplemental materials. I believe that's on page 2 of supplemental. So I'd encourage you to check that out. And please let me know if there's any questions related to what we have there. We do have our remaining schedule for those meetings for the rest of the year set as well. In terms of educational and outreach activities, one of the things I did want to spend just a moment to talk about is the regular recurring programming that we're offering. So again, as we're looking at this, the 8th edition being more normal for people, we did take the opportunity at the end of last year to reformulate the courses that we're offering. So we're continuing to offer our courses primarily through Zoom as the platform, hoping again, thinking through the cost effectiveness of that approach and reaching a broader audience. So what we've done for this year is we have offered again more CLE, CJE credits for the courses that we have. Our courses this year, the recurring ones are sentencing basics. So just thinking through like the statutory frameworks. We also have a course right around the guideline basics. So that really narrowly focuses in on the 8th edition in particular. We have a course on determining prior record score because that's been one of the areas that has been of significant interest for practitioners. We also have our legislative lunch and learn series. So next Thursday, I'll be doing our first for this year. And then we have 2 commission news sessions. All of those that I've just mentioned are the CLE credit seminars. We also have a walkthrough SGS Web. So we're still utilizing SGS Web, not offering CLE credit for that, but that's been really helpful, particularly for our newer users and getting them acclimated to the system. Touching on that, one of the things that we've done as a unit was develop a welcome packet for new users. So as you request your role and get your role in SGS Web, we have a packet of information, welcome email, just to try to get everyone oriented from our perspective. I know a lot of judicial districts have their informal process of getting everyone up and running, but we thought it was a good opportunity to try to train them our way a little bit in making sure that what we're looking for from SGS Web users. So that's been a nice project that the unit has embarked upon and implemented at the beginning of this year. Beyond those regular courses that we have, we do, if you go to our website, the seminar information does have what's scheduled throughout the year. We did have some opportunities for other educational content. So I had the opportunity to go to Allegheny's Criminal Law Symposium earlier this year. and presented an overview. And Ryan had done a session with the Philadelphia Bar Association, I believe last month. So did those as well. We are also engaged with the Parole Board for their basic training academy. We had a session in January there, and the county probation officers academy as well. So we built those in throughout the year for individuals. And then just kind of rounding out our monthly newsletter, we have copies of those found in the supplemental material. So if I believe you should all be receiving that, but we do have those copies for reference for you. I did want to highlight one change we're making with our newsletter. So looking through a lot of our operations, one thing that we're going to do is modify the frequency with which we're releasing updates. So we'll release our regularly scheduled April monthly update, and then moving forward, we're going to change to a quarterly newsletter for the content. So our next release will be July, and then October, and then January 2026. So the month after our quarterly business meetings, we'll take that opportunity to provide some news. We want to keep that regular contact with people that are receiving the newsletter, but also maybe have a little bit more detail in what we're releasing. So I'm excited for that transition as well, and seeing how that translates for users. In between the quarterly updates, we will continue to provide seminar and other educational content reminders for the people that we distribute to, because I think that's really important for us to maintain that regular contact. And I believe that rounds out my updates. I don't know if there are any other general questions, comments, suggestions.
Any questions for Bobby?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So how do you reach out to the various groups as far as advising them, of what educational opportunities are available? I know we get emails as judges, but I don't know. And also, who is that audience that you're trying to reach?
Yeah, that's a good question. So we use Constant Contact as our primary mechanism for distributing the information that you're referencing. We also get lists of, certainly judges are one of the audiences, chief probation officers. I go to their quarterly meetings, so I'm generally providing information to them. They're a big component of our SGS web users. And then our other associations, District Attorneys Association, public defenders and private attorneys, Bars Association, we've developed some good relationships with them. So that's the primary mechanism that we're utilizing. And then a large portion are the new SGS web users. We enroll them into our distribution list as well, so that they're getting that information to provide that support.
Thank you.
Bobby, if I just may add one thing for the judge and for the rest of the members, just a reminder that the commission several years ago became a CLE provider. And so any of the sessions in which Bobby and his unit are posting for CLE credit, they go to the CLE website, and then that's also another distribution opportunity that attorneys outside of maybe a county space that we're more, used to interacting with would receive that information as well. So I know a number of people attend commission sessions that find that information on the CLE website.
All right, thanks, Bobby.
Thank you.
Great. So we'll transition now from the administrative and outreach units to the research and technology groups it's like a shift change here in hockey, and bring down Noah, and followed by Christy.
Good afternoon, everybody.
Good afternoon.
So I want to start by providing some updates on our research partnerships. And one of our primary partners, as Matt and Ryan have discussed, is with Penn State University. And I'd like to provide some updates on that front. One that Matt already mentioned is that a former postdoctoral student, Miranda Galvin, who has been working at Townsend University over the past 3 years, received an assistant professorship in Penn State Sociology and Criminology Department, and will be affiliated with the commission. And this will be a strong asset to the commission as she'll be able to help us with our various mandates and reports. So we're very excited about this partnership and building it out. Another update on the Penn State partnerships is that we are collaborating currently with Pam Wilcox, a professor in Penn State's Criminology Department, on several projects related to probation, and with Jeffrey Almer, a professor in Penn State's Criminology Department, on several projects related to the sentencing of drug offenses. And a big theme of both of these projects is focusing on rural-urban differences, which are a key challenge for the Commonwealth, as having uniformity in responses is challenging across rural jurisdictions because of lack of resources. The other update I'd like to talk about is our other research partnerships. And one key update here is we are developing a unique partnership with Allegheny County's Criminal Division, a unique research practice partnership. And research practice partnerships in the field of criminal justice, they involve collaborations between researchers, such as the Pennsylvania Commission on Sentencing, and practitioners that focus on problems of practice and solutions for improving outcomes, such as reducing recidivism. And for this particular project, we're working with the Criminal Division to better understand their probation practices and how they affect a variety of outcomes. And Allegheny is a strategic partner in large part because they have robust behavioral health resources and a robust data system. So there's lots of opportunities to learn best practices and a strong willingness to collaborate with the commission. And we're very excited about this project. Another update in terms of in terms of our partnerships is that we're continuing to collaborate with AOPC on a variety of fronts. And this is important because they're helping us with the CASER data system and on a variety of research projects. And a main update here is that Dr. Kim Nieves, the Director of Research and Statistics at AOPC, and Andrew Ginder, their Assistant Director of Research and Statistics, will be providing a presentation on AOPC's data to commission staff in the upcoming month. And this will be a great opportunity for our staff to learn more about AOPC's data and to further develop that relationship. Thank you.
Thanks, Noah. Let me just add one piece of this is obviously I mentioned all the work that the commission staff have, and a lot of times we're in a position where we're being reactive. We're being told this is the issue we want to study. One of the great things of the Penn State partnership is that it gives us these resources through these postdocs and graduate students that allow us to be more proactive. So some of the research that Noah has highlighted with these collaborations with Penn State professors, with Allegheny County, the key researcher, if you would, is our postdoc, who's going to be providing incredible, valuable information back to the commission and all the criminal justice landscape. And again, I don't think that's possible internally with all the workload we have, but certainly supportive of that type of efforts and really amazing opportunities to work with the nationally known or internationally known faculty on these important research topics. So thanks to our partners for sharing data, for continuing to work with us and provide us with these opportunities. And as Noah, just to highlight that the relationship with Allegheny, at least in this context, came out of a study we did several years ago, funded by Bloomberg Philanthropies, on substance-involved offenders and repeat under supervision on probation. We made a relationship with their data person who we continue to work with. And it's just notable because it was a project that I worked on with, at the time, the postdoc Miranda Galvin, who's now coming back to Penn State. So it's all full circle and so forth. So thanks, Noah, and bring up Christy now.
All right. Thanks, Noah. Christy's on deck.
Good afternoon, everyone. My Apple Watch just said it's the spring equinox, so happy first day of spring. So the major focus for the applications and IT unit continues to be the Next Gen initiative and the developer of the Caser application, which will eventually replace SGS Web. So I'm going to spend a little time just talking about the progress we've made since the last meeting. The last meeting, I showed you guys a demo. I'm not going to go into that, but I am going to show a few screenshots. To start with, this is our project roadmap for the development of Caser. So it shows all the major features and functions of the application and the sequence that we're working on them in. Since the December commission meeting, we have completed the screens and functionality for generating the sentencing guidelines via the application. So that first blue box up there. So that's a pretty big milestone for us. This included correcting all outstanding issues that we had on the offense creation screen, completing the prior record score functionality, implementing some improvements to our OGS and PRS page, implementing the sentence risk assessment instrument, developing the sentence recommendation page, and also building the sentencing guideline report. So I'll show you that in a minute. So right now we're currently wrapping up the testing of the sentencing guidelines generation functionality, and then we'll be moving on to start work on the development of the sentence submission functionality. So here's one of the pages that are screens that we kind of wrapped up since last time. This is the OGS and PRS screen. So what this shows for the user is the offense gravity score and the prior record score that has been calculated for each offense. And then if they expand each offense, they can see additional information such as how that OGS was actually determined. If there was an enhancement applied, it'll show that, hey, there was an enhancement applied and that increased the OGS by 2. That's why it's not, the normal OGS. And then it'll also show the prior record score, like which prior offenses were considered when it determined that the person had a prior offense group of 4 and that sort of thing. So they can actually see where some of those values are coming from if they want to. This next screen is the sentence recommendation screen. So it shows any recommendations that we have related to sentencing. The primary one, of course, is the sentencing guideline recommendation. So as they expand the offenses, they'll see the specific guideline recommendation for an offense. This is also the screen where they'll be able to see the sentence risk assessment and where they can print the sentencing guideline form from that's given to judges during trials or hearings, sentencing hearings. I do want to mention that in Caser, we are bringing a little more attention to the risk assessment value by putting it on this screen. In SGS Web, by comparison, it was on a screen that they didn't have to go to as part of the process. But since this is where they come to print the guideline forms, it's kind of at the top of the page so that they'll actually see the value. And then I don't know if you'll be able to see this, but they'll be able to hover over the value and it'll actually tell you, because the only values we tell them are additional information recommended or not applicable just because of, I don't want to get into the background, but that's what we're allowed to tell them. So we do have in that bottom left, there'll be a tooltip that just explains that this means they were determined to be low or high risk using the risk instrument. And then there is a view details button, but that's only available for PCS staff to troubleshoot issues just to make sure that the value we're showing there is correct. So end users actually won't be able to see that level of detail, but PCS staff will. And then this is our new version of the guideline form. So still a work in progress, but I do think it's a lot easier to find information on here than our previous version. So for the judges in the room, you'll remember the previous version is structured more like a form. So there's a lot of space for people to fill in information related to the sentence imposed. But we found that people weren't really using it that way. So it's a lot of stuff on there, labels and stuff that didn't need to be on there. So when we developed this, we developed it more as a report. So on the left-hand side will be all the information that's specifically related to the person. So it's more the offender level information. And then the right side will be the individual offenses and information that's related to the offenses. And then we tried to call out the sentence recommendation by kind of using that gray background to make sure it's easy to find. And then the other thing we're doing is instead of having one offense per page, if there's multiple offenses or multiple charges, it will print multiple charges on a page. So, save paper, save the environment. Okay, so this is the project timeline that I presented during our December meeting. We estimated that the full application development and testing will be completed by September 2026 and the state rollout wrapping up in 2027. And I'm happy to report that we're still on track so far. So good news. For example, I mentioned it a little earlier that we're wrapping up the Senate's guidelines generation functionality. We had estimated that that would be done by April 2nd, and we are on track to hit that milestone. So I mostly have to credit our in-house team with how well that's going, as well as the developer that we have on the team that we contracted through Carbon Creek. She's been phenomenal. And we do have, I don't have it bolded right. We do have an action item seeking approval for a new contract with Carbon Creek that will extend her for another 3 months through the end of June for $50,000. So I'm going to turn it back to the chair to seek a motion on that action item.
All right, is there a motion to approve the service purchase contract with Carbon Creek? Not to exceed $50,000 to provide application development services for the next gen.
Caesar.
Caesar. I think I used that. I was gonna say
I'll make
cursor,
it.
but
Cursor.
Caesar application.
I'll
We have a
second it.
motion. Is it Judge McLaughlin?
I think
Yes.
Judge McDermott
Judge McDermott was
was
first.
first. Yeah.
Judge McLaughlin second. All right. All those in favor of approval of the contract, say aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay. All right, the service purchase contract, Carbon Creek is approved.
Great. Okay, so I just have a few more updates. So in addition to developing Caesar, we do continue to support and maintain the legacy SGS web application. February 27th, we deployed several fixes and enhancements to the production application. So we addressed an issue where risk assessment was not properly scoring juvenile adjudications in certain scenarios. And then we also implemented some changes related to Act 144 of 2022 and Act 16 of 2024. So these acts modified statutory language related to registerable offenses, making these offenses ineligible for county intermediate punishment programs. So we just implemented support for that into the application. And then the last thing I'll report is, as of January 31st, we had over 116,000 sentences submitted with sentencing dates in 2024 and 5,000 submitted with sentencing dates in 2025 in SGS Web. So that's all I have. Are there any questions about either the Caesar development or anything else I talked about?
I like at least how the form looked here, the current form with the new guidelines. I don't know
Don't love.
how my fellow colleagues feel about it, but I think it's just getting used to it, but it is
Yeah.
hard to figure out where things are on there, especially and we still have things like triple RI ineligible, yes, no. It's like a double negative trying to figure out what to put with that. And yeah, I just at least the looks there looks a little bit better than the current form, because I have heard complaints, at least in this county, about the
Yeah.
current form we have.
Okay.
Yeah, and if I might, I think what we're going to plan to do is leverage the judges who are on the commission and share this and walk through a module and get feedback too before we move forward with it. But I think rather than utilizing our standing committees, I think this is a situation where the judges who receive this, we can certainly tailor this and make sure it looks right, worded right, all those good things.
Sure. No, I think we'd all be glad to help.
Great. We'll plan to do that in the next meeting. Then maybe we'll just focus on the form for a few minutes. Yeah.
Other questions for Christy?
Never mind.
All right, thank you.
Okay, well, now we're going to get an update on the vast set of research activities that are going on in Brett Miller's unit. And I think Noah's going to start by talking about SR 196, but we'll bring Brett up to cover all the different activities.
Hello again, everybody. So it's exciting to give updates on SR 196. Just to give some background information and a reminder, recognizing the importance of research for improving practices, the Senate mandated that the commission conduct a comprehensive study of veterans in the criminal justice system in Pennsylvania. I believe this resolution was passed in June of last year. And a major emphasis of this resolution is on the behavioral health challenges among vets and the intersection of these challenges with the criminal justice system. And it's a pivotal study as it illustrates the close interplay between the criminal justice system and behavioral health. This is the project timeline that we introduced at the inception of the study. And I just want to note three things on this project timeline. First, conducting this study, this large study in 15 months was very ambitious, and we are accomplishing a lot in a short period. A major part of this was getting an identifier on vet status and linking it to PCS and AOPC data. That has never been done before in terms of looking at sentencing patterns and other criminal justice patterns in the level of detail that the PCS is going to do. And so this is a major accomplishment for the team, and we're starting analyses on those fronts. The last thing I'll note with this timeline is as we accomplish these tasks, we're putting the report together, and we'll give this report to the advisory board to help generate recommendations for how to proceed. So I'd like to give some specific updates on things that we've been doing with SR 196. First, we've been conducting surveys of county jail wardens and president judges to get feedback on the practices within their specific jurisdictions regarding veterans in the criminal justice system. We've also done site visits to Allegheny and Jefferson County, and also SCI Houtzdale's Veteran Services Unit. To learn more about the practices and the innovative practices going on at that site and at VSUs across the Commonwealth. We have also, in the past quarter, conducted a variety of interviews to learn more about veterans' involvement in the criminal justice system and best practices for assisting veterans. These include interviews with veterans justice officers, representatives from the Department of Military and Veterans Affairs, a representative from the Regional Veterans Treatment Court, which was developed in 2024 and covers 8 counties in the Commonwealth. We have also met with AOPC staff involved with veterans treatment courts and county veterans affairs directors. As I mentioned a moment ago, we've merged veteran status obtained from the Department of Veterans Affairs with PCS and AOPC data, and this has allowed us to begin preliminary analysis of patterns of criminal justice involvement among veterans and responses to veterans in the criminal justice system.
And I'll just note at the last meeting, if you remember, I presented some of that merged data with PCS only. So we're extending that to actually look at cases filed in magisterial courts and municipal courts, and then following through Court of Common Pleas, and then looking at the sentencing outcomes. So what we shared last time was just on the sentencing data. We'll have a much more robust picture now that we've linked it to AOPC data.
Thank you, Matt. Another contribution that our study is making is we've developed a framework that we're calling the Veterans Cascade of Care. And I want to thank Matt for all his work on these slides, graphic expertise. And the Cascade of Care, just for some background information, the cascade of care describes the optimum continuum of care for identifying behavioral health problems and triaging individuals into appropriate clinical services. The cascade model was originally used to help better understand and respond to the AIDS epidemic and was later used by Belenko and colleagues to better understand how to link individuals with substance use disorder who are in the criminal justice system to behavioral health services. And research, for example, has shown that individuals with substance use disorder who need and receive a cascade of care are much less likely to recidivate and to overdose. And we have modified the model to better fit veterans in the criminal justice system. A major modification was adding the first step, which we've learned is critical to providing better practices to veterans, identification. And in the identification stage, a key question, of key importance is doing this as early as possible in the system. And the key question that we've learned that it's effective for getting the correct response is, have you served in the military? And then once a veteran status is identified, and our research shows that about 6% of individuals in our sentencing data and in the AOPC data are veterans. And after identification, the next important step is to conduct screenings for behavioral health issues. And these screenings should be administered to all veterans. And a screener involves an evidence-based standardized instrument. It is brief. It is suitable for non-clinical staff, so individuals without clinical training can do these screeners in a variety of criminal justice settings, and it's used to determine whether further assessment is needed. The assessment is more comprehensive, and it helps guides diagnosis and treatment planning. And some key differences between assessment and screening is that the assessment process needs to be done by a trained clinician. It's longer, and well, it's also evidence-based like the screener. After assessment, and we can see here that these circles are getting smaller, and this is used to indicate that the population that is screened, not everybody will need an assessment, and that out of the population that is assessed, not everybody will need to be referred to treatment. But for those who have a need identified after assembling the screening and assessment information, a referral is made to appropriate treatment outlets, and treatment is initiated. This includes attending the first appointment, engagement with treatment, going to multiple appointments within a 30 to 60-day period, and then continuing care, which involves retention and treatment, transfers to new treatments that may be needed, and then booster treatments. And again, this is what from our research shows to be an effective model for linking individuals in veterans in need of care to the appropriate services.
So I'll just add really quick. One of the things that we liked about this model is you could think about for Veterans Treatment Court, you'd think about identifying veterans who are eligible, screening them to meet the needs. This same model would fit for that group. For the DOC, when intake, you're going to identify if they're veterans, screen them, assess them for their needs, find out if they should be put in a veteran service unit, and then what sort of treatment should be undertaken and so forth. So there's a lot of flexibility here at different stages, be it probation, parole, county confinement, state confinement, and just in general diversion of individuals in the community and how to link them to the correct resources. But as Noah said, really one of the challenges is identifying these people immediately in the system where that exists or where that happens and asking the right question and then thinking about how to move down this cascade of care. So that's why we selected this and developed it. And I think it's going to be a really important component of our report to identify barriers and also where, as Noah mentioned earlier, like in rural communities, what are the treatment options that are available as opposed to in more urban areas. So it allows for a lot of flexibility to define the landscape of veterans in the criminal justice system.
Thank you, Matt. And Matt brought up an important point. This cascade of care looks simple to do, but in the criminal justice system, an intersection with behavioral health, it's incredibly complicated. And our report will show some of those barriers and complexities and hopefully provide some recommendations for solutions for addressing those complexities. Thank you. I'd be lost without the assistance. So I would like to close with some next steps on SR 196 as we close out the study over the next 4 or 5 months, if I'm counting correctly. We are going to be continuing our analyses of our data sources, including both our administrative data sources, the surveys, our qualitative data from site visits and interviews. We are conducting a site visit to Chester County in May in 2 months, and we'll be meeting with members of their Veterans Treatment Court and with other officials who work with veterans involved in the criminal justice system who are not involved with the Veterans Treatment Court. We are going to be conducting additional interviews. I actually went by the Veterans Multi-Service Center today and learned about, just a couple blocks away, learned more about their resources, and we'll be doing a variety of interviews over the next, additional interviews over the next few months. And Matt and I hope to connect with Senator Coleman in his office to give them an update on the project and to get feedback as we close it out. We also have an advisory board meeting in, I believe it's May 15th of 2025, in which we will present our results and start getting feedback on recommendations, and we will continue drafting the final report.
Great, thanks, Noah. I think I'll request to the chair, maybe we take a 5-minute break before Brett goes through his materials and then give the court reporter a break for a few moments, if that's okay with the chair.
Fine with me. All right, 5 minutes, but we're going to stick to it because I know a lot of people were planning on getting out of here. But we'll take a 5-minute recess. All right, I wish my recesses were that timely in court. They are never that timely, but it looks like everyone's back, so we'll turn it back over to Matt and Brett.
Good afternoon, everyone. For my update today, I just kind of wanted to take a step back and kind of underscore some of Matt's points from the top of the meeting. So thinking about the agenda of projects that we have for 2025, and then considering our resource load. Got a very busy 2025 agenda, so I just want to highlight that again. And then also I'll dig a little deeper and provide some more detailed updates on two of our other ongoing projects, our simulation modeling, and then our most recent data snapshot story. So first of all, just to start the year off here with our March meeting, taking a look at our workload for the year, I just want to highlight a couple of things. Number one, of course, is that we're very busy, but number two is that every project that we work on, especially in our unit, is tied very directly to our enabling legislation or statutes that we have for the parole board or different various data agreements that we have with other agencies. So on the screen here, I've got just some of our core functions for the unit, which are all spelled out in our enabling legislation. So number one, and probably what takes up the most of our time, is to serve as a clearinghouse and information center of sentencing data. This involves our data from SGS Web, sharing data externally with researchers, and that probably takes up probably a quarter of our overall staff time. Next would be to assist in a consulting capacity to the board, to the legislature, and this has to do with filling out legislative impact analyses, working with other agencies like the parole board, which I'll talk about more a little bit later. And then less frequently, we also assist with coming up with new guidelines, new policies, and then evaluating the effectiveness of existing policies. Our primary project for the year, obviously, is SR 196, which is our veteran study. So Noah just gave a good update on that, but this is really an agency-wide project where almost everyone, definitely everyone in my unit, almost across the agency, is involved in some way or another with this project. So it's been a big lift for us. As Noah said, we've got 4 or 5 more months to go here, but I think we're in a good spot now. We've made a lot of progress in terms of data collection, site visits. I think we're in a good spot to hit our deadline coming up in September. For those of you that have been around a while, you've heard a lot about short sentence parole. We conducted our first short sentence parole evaluation in 2023. And as part of our mandate under the parole statutes, we're actually mandated to conduct a follow-up study to that evaluation. So that evaluation has a due date of November of this year. We've already started reaching out to DOC to collect data, and we've put together our project outline for this upcoming evaluation. We've been doing a lot of work with the parole board recently. As the chairman mentioned earlier, the board has an upcoming retreat in April. Matt and I will actually be attending that retreat and presenting on the first year or so of the parole guidelines and taking a look at the effectiveness of the guidelines, sort of decisions being made, and how often do parole decisions follow along and comply with the guidelines. We'll be looking at those initial results and sharing those with the board in the next couple of weeks on April 3rd at that retreat. Coming up later this year, we'll be conducting our first validation of the risk assessment model. So the model was adopted, I think, in 2020. And it's obviously COVID had an impact on some of the implementation, but now we're about 5 years into the model, and we have a mandate to, I believe, every 3 years to validate that model. So last year we shared a little bit of information on the utilization of the risk assessment, but this year we're actually going to look at the underlying risk assessment model and take a look at the input factors and just make sure that the model as it's currently designed is still effective, is still adequately assessing risk and predicting recidivism. In addition to our annual judge verification and certification and compliance process, we also have a mandate that we haven't really been able to enact up to this point, which involves resentencing verification. We've been collecting resentencing information, I think, since 2016, but it's been a bit of a slow buildup working with the counties to try to get more of those probation revocations and resentences submitted to SGS Web. I think now, looking at the 2024 sentencing year, I think we've gotten to a point where we've received enough resentencing information that we can actually create reports for each of the individual counties, send those out to them, and just kind of for the first kickoff here of resentencing verification, just have them review their cases, report back to us. Does it look like you've submitted all of the resentences in your county? If not, this is an opportunity where we can work with them and try to get more of those resentences reported. Back in the fall, we started a new initiative, which is our data snapshots, which are short data-focused stories that we post to the website. We've completed 2 of those over the last 6 months or so. We're currently working on the 3rd one, and we hope to have that posted to the website probably in the next few weeks here. And as part of my update in a minute, I'll go through just a quick highlight of what that current snapshot is going to be about. We also have a mandate to create simulation models. The mandate spells out that the commission is required to have models for the purpose of assessing population projections and for looking at impacts of policy changes and new legislation within the state. So again, I'll go into a little bit more detail on our simulation modeling in just a minute here, but essentially we've been working on this project for 4 or 5 years now, and our real struggle has been how can we find a way to actually apply these models in our everyday work. And so I think we've made some strides there, and I'll give an update on that as we go on. We also have our interactive data portal on our website, which we posted back in 2022. This interactive data portal it allows users to interact with dashboards, custom report builders, and really simplifies working with and summarizing the sentencing data that we have. And it allows users to just quickly access any question they might have, sentencing practices for a particular offense or time period or county or whatever detail they want to select on. So we update this data portal each year as we release our annual report. It currently goes up through 2022, which is our most recent annual report. But we'll be updating it hopefully later this spring with our 2023 data. And finally, we have a lot of recurring tasks in our unit. Most of these, again, relating to our obligation to serve as a data clearinghouse. So we spend probably about a week's worth of staff time every month extracting the most recent month's data from SGS Web, cleaning up that information, coding it, and then going out to various different resources and trying to find and fill in any missing data that we might find from the previous months. So that might involve looking at SID numbers for an individual, correcting docket numbers, that type of work. But it's a very manual process. Like I said, probably takes about a week's worth of staff time every month. We also get a lot of external data requests. Noah mentioned earlier our research partnerships, but we also get data requests from universities all around the country, probably about 25 a year, where they're asking for copies of our annual data sets, and many times going historically back to as far back as 1985 when we started compiling these. We also get a lot of questions from members of the legislature, from DAs, from private attorneys, asking for more specific summarized data reports, looking at, a lot of times we'll get a call in the middle of a criminal case and an attorney will want to know, hey, I've got this case, this specific offense, this criminal history. Can you run me a report for the last 3 years on what these sentences look like? We get quite a few of those. We get a lot of, when there's new upcoming bills in the legislature, we'll get an email that says, hey, we're going to vote on this tomorrow. Can you guys quickly provide us with a report telling us what might be the impact of this proposed new legislation? We get a lot of those too, a lot of times with short response times. And each time we get one of these, it's kind of, we get put in a spot where it's pushing another project off for basically for that whole day. And finally, we have a mandate where we are required to collect information on external studies and research that are conducted using the commission's data. So we have a process where about every quarter, we'll have a staff member go out, search all the latest research publications, find all the studies that might relate to either using our data or relate to our policies and guidelines. And then we keep a running list of all of those research reports on our website. So that's just kind of the high level look at a lot of our major projects coming up in our unit for this year. And we also have others that are annual projects like the certification and compliance or annual report, which I didn't include. Just to highlight again, we're very busy, relatively small research staff. So we've been spending a lot of time just trying to think about how we can thread the needle of meeting all these deadlines and mandates with our relatively small staff. I'll just take a little pause there if there's any questions.
I'll just add one thing, which I think, we've been talking about this research partnership and a professor coming back, and Brett's unit of the research team has 4 staff, and 2 of them come directly from Penn State's graduate program. One was a graduate assistant with us for a number of years. So it's a really great resource for us from the technical, statistical side, being in central PA, but adjacent to this world-class university that we can recruit and keep really talented statistical folks. So as you can see, Brett's team is under a lot of demands, and it requires incredible nimbleness to deal with all this data and merge and match, and they do a fantastic job.
All right. So if there's no questions on that, I'll go ahead and move on. And I wanted to provide a little bit of an update on our simulation modeling. So this is something we've been working on a lot recently. Again, this is a mandated project. Our enabling legislation points out that we must maintain a simulation model and keep it up to date. So I've given some of this history before, but basically we established our first version of simulation models just before COVID. And at that time, we were excited and ready to start using these and sharing with DOC for population projections, those types of applications. Then all of a sudden COVID hits, and all of a sudden our simulation models are sort of out of date all of a sudden because everything has changed. So we kind of took a break from simulation modeling for a couple of years there during COVID. And then we're also working on new sentencing guidelines, which also made some of the models out of date. But basically, it was around the middle of last year, we decided to pick this up again. We had our new 8th edition guidelines had just passed. So we decided this might be a good time to just build a new model based on the 8th edition guidelines. And then let's really spend some time thinking about how we can actually make these models useful and apply them to our regular work. So I'll talk a little bit about the work we've been doing. And again, just our mandate for these models is to be able to simulate look at the resources required for all of our guidelines and policies. And then also the model should be able to look at resources that would be required under any pending legislation, policy changes, anything like that. So as I mentioned, back around 2019, 2020, we actually developed 4 different models. One of these was kind of a zoomed out look at the entire court system and criminal justice process, with the idea being that, you know, if we can identify trends in case filing early on, we might be able to project ahead of time and get an early forecast for sentence to state incarceration, overall sentences. So that was the idea of the first model. The second one was more of a detailed simulation of our actual sentencing guideline policies. And the third and fourth were kind of offshoots of that, looking specifically at state parole releases and rates of recommitments, and then looking at, on the county level, at probation revocations and resentencing for those revocations. So we had 4 different models. Like I said, one of our real challenges was these things are very specific. How often do we really get asked questions about county probation or about state parole recommitments? The truth was not very much. So we really spent some time, like I said, thinking about like how we have these models, how can we make them practical and useful? And so what I thought the area to really focus in on as we move forward is probably more along the lines of our second model from the past, which was looking at the actual sentencing guideline policies. And then that gives us the ability to, as time goes on, we can either examine potential changes to the guidelines and we can model those, or we can use those to look at upcoming legislation that might change the OGS score of an existing offense, or it might create a new offense. And then we can simulate what might actually happen under that new scenario. So, like I said, the new model is based on 8th edition guidelines. We don't actually have any data yet on 8th edition sentences. So what we did was take a look at historical sentences from the 7th edition, and we sort of mapped all of those onto the 8th edition rules and logic. So for every offense, we know what the 8th edition OGS will be. We have a pretty good idea of what the distribution of PRS scores will be. So we kind of built those into our model. And then looking at all the historical models, we sort of asked the question, for each of these sentences, what would the sentence recommendation look like under the 8th edition? And going through, reviewing all of that data, basically what we ended up doing is creating a probabilistic model of every historical sentence and sentence type. So for example, if you had an F1 offense with an OGS of 20, where the PRS is 0, we know historically that 75% of those cases will get a state confinement sentence. So that's kind of the idea of how the model works. And then we can do that same thing for every other sentencing scenario, every other offense. So back to the idea of how do we apply this? First and foremost would be whenever we want to explore the idea of changing the guidelines in any way. Now we have a tool where we can do that. But again, that's not something we do every day or even every year. So another area where we might be able to make more frequent use of these models is actually in the cases where we get questions from the legislature on impact analyses of upcoming bills, new offenses, things of that nature. So as I mentioned before, we get probably one of these a month, maybe 10 to 15 per year. And the questions are often things like, what is going to be the correctional system's impact for this new bill? And if it's creating a new offense that didn't exist before, we get asked, we know this is going to be a new offense, but can you give us an idea of how often will this happen? What will the sentences look like for this non-existing offense? So that's a hard thing to do using historical data. So kind of what our method has always been is sort of this back of the envelope approach where we say, okay, if there's going to be a new firearms offense, doesn't exist currently, but if we look at the existing other firearms offenses, it's kind of close to this one, and kind of close to this one. So we sort of split the difference and just estimate that it'll look something like those existing offenses. And that's kind of the best we can do, just using historical data. The nice thing about the simulation is we can actually directly input these new offense details, and the model already knows, well, okay, if it's this grade, if it's this OGS level, we've got a pretty good idea of what those sentencing trends are going to look like for that offense, even though it's never existed before. So just as a quick example of what this might look like, let's say there's a new Senate bill that increases the grade of an existing offense from an M2 to an M1. So that part's pretty easy for our back of the envelope analysis. We get those all the time. But the second part of it is the bill also adds 2 new offense levels that didn't exist. So now it's going to add a new F2 level and a new F1 level to an existing offense. So pretty easy to estimate that the number of M1 cases is going to stay the same as the number of the old M2 cases. So that part is not too complicated. But the simulation model can actually help us to get information on those 2 new non-existing subsections. So the method for using the simulation for this would be, in our model, we've got a list of every offense, 2,000 plus offenses. So we can go in and we can grab that offense or create a new one and adjust the offense grades to be, we can adjust that M2 to the M1. We can make some assumptions on the new subsections. Maybe we assume that 10% of cases will be the F2, 5% will be the F1 version. And then we can run our model and have the ability to have multiple years of simulated sentences for this new non-existing offense. And that the idea is this can give us some information that we can add on to the end of a report that we would give to the legislature. So maybe we'll still do our back of the envelope version. We'll still do that one, but maybe the simulation is like an augmentation where we can add a little more, an extra layer of insight to those reports. So some of the results we might be able to get out of that model would be like looking at the total increase of state confinement months sentenced. So in this example, maybe that's 800 extra months per year. And we know the marginal cost for a bed day at DOC. So if we apply that, we can provide the legislature with a cost estimate that maybe this new bill will cost DOC an extra $1 million per year in bed days, and an increase in county confinement time, but maybe that's somewhat offset by a decrease in probation time. So that's kind of the idea of the types of results that and insights that we can get out of this model. I'm hoping our goal is to start implementing this over the next few months here in 2025 and see how it goes, see if it's useful. I think this is a way where we're required to have these models. This is a way where we can maybe try to make some use of them.
Right, is the main purpose for these models the requirement to estimate costs for like DOC and counties?
The main purpose, as it's listed in statute, is to be able to inform population projections. So that's really the primary focus. And then the number 2 would be looking at when we change our guidelines and policies, looking at those impacts. But yeah, I think an extension, an obvious extension would be to add more of that cost information in there. So if we could add in court costs, confinement costs, those things would all make it even more valuable. All right. And just real briefly, I just wanted to walk through quickly our next data snapshot. So like I said, we started these last fall, and currently we're working on our 3rd story, which will be posted to the website. And the topic of this 3rd story is on 25 years of sentencing trends. So something we haven't done a lot of of taking a look at trends over time. But we thought a nice, interesting application of doing that might be to look at the trends of state prison sentences over the last 25 years. So this table here just kind of shows that on the blue line, we have the total sentences reported to the commission. In the orange, we have state confinement sentences reported to the commission. And over time, you can see that the total sentences vary from 75,000 to 100,000, with little blips here and there as certain things occur, either through legislative changes or societal issues like COVID-19. So you can see the big dip in total sentences during COVID. Not as much of a dip for state confinement sentences. And then something we talk about a lot internally is the rate of sentences to state confinement. And we've always felt that these are really stable. They tend to be anywhere from around 10 to 12 or 13% of all sentences go to state confinement every year. And so looking at this across time, we see that that's mostly true. There was a peak from about 2009 to about 2013, where we approached 15% sentences going to state. And then starting in 2014 or 15, it really started to drop off, and we hit a low in during COVID in 2020. And another way that we found that we can look at the impact of state sentencing is by combining the number of sentences with the length of those sentences and looking at the total amount of time sentenced to state incarceration year by year. So if you look at it this way, you can see that the trends actually move a lot more dramatically. So during the period, again, from about 2007 to 2014, things really peaked, which means we had more state sentences and longer state sentences. And then right around or just before the time that the mandatory minimums were repealed, we started to see a pretty sharp drop in state confinement sentences, state confinement time sentenced. And then that obviously hit the all-time low in 2020 for COVID. And what's interesting is our bounce back post-COVID is not quite at the same level as looking back to 2015. It's kind of hovering in that somewhat lower area from the late 2010s. And as we looked at these state sentences, what we noticed is that many of the sentences and a majority of the sentence time is actually coming from just maybe a half a dozen offenses. So between PWID, robbery, aggravated assault, burglary, rape, IDSI, and VUFA offenses, those made up more than 80% of time sentenced to state confinement in 1999. And then by 2023, that share from those offenses had dropped a little bit, but still more than 2/3 of state confinement time was just from those 6 offenses. You can see that, you might not be able to see the highlighting, but some of these have dropped pretty substantially over the last 25 years. So PWID, time sentenced to state, has dropped. It's still number 1 on the list, though. Robbery has dropped substantially, and burglary has also dropped pretty substantially over those 25 years. But those drops are made up for in large part by an increase in firearms offenses being sentenced to state. It was almost non-existent in 1999 at 1%. And now in 2023, the firearms make up almost the most amount of time sentenced to state confinement. And just kind of graphically looking at each of these offenses over time, this is the time sentenced to state confinement for each of those 4 primary offense types. You can see even more clearly here that those drops in burglary and robbery are almost mirrored by the increase in the firearms offenses going to state. And then on the top right, you have PWIDs, which started at the top and finished at the top, but there was a pretty substantial drop over those 25 years. So for our data story, we're going to flesh this out a little bit more. We'll add a narrative to it, but as kind of the high level look at the last 25 years and state confinement trends. So with that, I think that's all I've got for my update. Well, I'll take any questions that you guys might have.
Questions for Brett? These data snapshots are really interesting, I think, and really helpful. So this one especially. I'm sorry. The data snapshots are really helpful, very interesting, especially watching these trends here. So great work.
And thanks, Judge. For the next one, we are planning on using the SR 196, this data. We're going to get matched to AOPC to do a data snapshot on veterans involved in the criminal justice system. But we certainly would welcome any suggestions for a topic that we should dig into. We're trying to make them timely, of course, and it is a nice way for us to disseminate findings from our evaluation like we did for short sentence parole previously, just to distill that into something a lot more digestible. And we're trying also to strip these down, and let the reader, if you would, look at this and interpret it, not irresponsibly, but just to make without a lot of text that accompanies it. So we're getting better at making these but again, would appreciate any input or suggestions for future data snapshots, either over time or a particular topic or area. Clearly, one will be about early results, if you would, about how the new guidelines work, conformity rates, what's prior record score 0. Once we have that finalized, we can create a really short summary to put up on the website. But thanks to Brett and his team for working on this for sure. Okay, back to Ryan now to wrap a few things up on policy side of things. And with any new format and structure, my apologies that we're running a little longer, but combining the two, we used to do 4 hours, so now we're just at 2 hours and 10 maybe. So bear with us, we're almost done. Thanks.
I think that's an indication for me to be brief, as I like to say. So what I'll do is I'll wrap up the meeting here for us today. First, we'll just give you some information on policy updates, as Matt mentioned, and then a couple of miscellaneous information items, and then we'll turn it back to the chair to adjourn the meeting. I'll be sort of high level and summarize here, consistent with what I did earlier. One of the things I thought was timely is just to talk about staff track the actions of the General Assembly. And, there's a lot of detail that goes into that, but it's an activity we do, and this is the start of a new session. So we provide information to you in the supplemental notebook. If you look in the supplemental, pages 25 through 36 is the information around policy that I'll be referencing just in general. What I wanted to at least make the commission members aware of is as we proceed through this year and certainly proceed through the session, the legislative information we provide in the notebook will change, right? This is early in the session. Information has only been, bills have been introduced. There hasn't been any movement, but as we move towards budget time, in June, we might see some bills passing. And I just wanted to remind everybody as we go through that process and we track it, if a bill passes and is enacted, then staff will provide in the notebook and the supplemental materials a summary of that bill or that act, and then also what we perceive as the impact on our guidelines or any sentencing statutes. And that helps inform, is there any actions that the commission would need to take in terms of sentencing enhancement or assigning offense gravity scores and so forth. So I just wanted to kind of give that high level overview that we're tracking this to make sure if there's any impacts to the commission, we would be able to bring that to you in a timely manner during the quarterly meetings. That leads me into the next bullet on the screen, which is a brief errata discussion. And I'm going to jump forward a slide here. And if you look in the supplemental materials, there's an errata document. I believe it's 2 pages, maybe 2.5 pages. And I'll start by just reminding commission members that in June of last year, we had a similar discussion. This is pretty consistent in terms of when guidelines are adopted and published and become, in play or effective for things. We find typos, right? And or the legislature makes a change in a label of an offense. And for us to stay consistent with those and make sure we're providing practitioners with correct information, From time to time, we become aware of these and we fix those, if you will, through the errata document, which is posted to the commission's website. Consistent within June, this is, I'm just informing members of here's sort of the matters that we saw, and that information will be posted on the commission's website. This is pretty brief and simple. I'll just visually show it to you because I think it's helpful. This is a snippet of the errata document. If you look in the upper right-hand corner, we noticed that we omitted a notation for either a mandatory or an enhancement in the offense listing. This was an act by staff during the creation of the guidelines to try to be helpful to practitioners. If a mandatory applied to a particular offense, we made a notation. If an enhancement applied, we made a notation. As we were looking through the offense listing, we saw a couple of omissions. And so it's, textual, there's no substantive to it. Again, this is be helpful to practitioners. What you'll see then on the left-hand side are some underlined areas for sexual abuse of children, which, was often referred to as child pornography in the past. Just a reminder that last year, Act 125 changed the label of that offense to reference it as child sexual abuse material. And so to be consistent in our offense listing, we just changed the word to include child sexual abuse material rather than using the older language. Nothing of substance. There's no changes in the grades of the offenses, the offense gravity score, and so forth. Just wanted to make you aware of that. And I'll end on this note to say, if somebody enters SGS Web or looks in the guidelines for that offense and they don't see it specifically as it's listed in statute, we get the call. And so it's a little way for us to be proactive. I'm going to bounce around just quickly and then I'll be done. The last thing I wanted to mention, at least from the policy side, is informational for you. We continue to track case law that impacts guidelines and sentencing, parole, whatever it might be in our realm. And we provide that update in the supplemental materials for you each quarter. It's interactive. If you're viewing it electronically, we link to any of the opinions by our appellate courts. So just making you aware that we have that information in there. If there isn't any questions on the policy, I'll move forward with the miscellaneous and then turn it back to the chair to wrap out the meeting.
Any questions for Ryan? All right, back to you.
All right. Two quick pieces of information. Matt mentioned this early on. The National Association of Sentencing Commissions has its annual conference that will be held in August 11 through 12 in Madison, Wisconsin. In summary, the Pennsylvania Commission on Sentencing historically has represented well, is a big supporter of NASC, and NASC looks to Pennsylvania to provide a lot of technical assistance through its executive board and also the expertise and knowledge in terms of presenting breakout sessions or participating in panels. Our executive director is the vice president of NASC, so you can see that we're engaged. Staff last year, I think, participated in 4 or 5 breakout sessions, and we would expect a similar representation of Pennsylvania this year. Just note this, that in the past, commission members have also attended at times. So if there's interest by members, please reach out to Matt and myself, and we can provide you some additional information on NASC as a conference.
One thing just to note is, this is more related to the commission in general, not specifically to me, is the commission is viewed nationally and internationally as the standard bearer for sentencing commissions and sentencing guidelines. So I recently worked with Minnesota on their rebuild of their guidelines. Next month through NASC, we'll be speaking to folks in Michigan who are reconvening a sentencing commission to reconsider developing guidelines. I think they stopped in 2005, 2000, whatever year. They haven't had guidelines in practice for a long time. So the governor is very interested in guidelines. So I'll be meeting with the folks from Michigan. And again, it's really a reflection of the expertise and reputation of this commission.
Thanks, Matt. Next meeting, we'll be here in Harrisburg again, June 12th. And then also just a heads up, I had written down the dates for our upcoming meetings. The September commission meeting will be on the 11th in State College. And then the December 4th commission meeting will be back here in Harrisburg. So
Just one more reminder that the June meeting will follow the same format, beginning at 11. Maybe we'll schedule it to end at 1:30, and then we can say we finished early. And staff will be reaching out if there are transportation or lodging needed for that meeting as well. So thank you.
All right, any questions for Matt or Ryan? Any motions to adjourn? No, we'll stay here. Okay,
I'll make it.
so moved.
Judge
Second.
McDermott.
Any objections? All right, we will adjourn. Thank you, everybody. Great reports. See you
Thank you.
back here in June.
See everyone in June.